Hello and welcome to Inside F1 from Bahrain. The last few years have been a difficult mix here of politics and sport. Before we talk about the politics, let's talk about the sport. And I'm delighted to say that Heikki Kovalainen joins us this evening. Heikki, great to see you back in the paddock and in the car today. Tell us what your role is at Caterham.
Well, yeah, first of all, it's great to be back. I really enjoyed, although there's limited time in the car, it's much better than being at home. The targets for the next couple of races are pretty clear. I mean, first of all, this weekend, the target was to get a comparison from my feelings from last year to this year. Last year we had actually quite a well-balanced car, although it was lacking performance, it was quite well-balanced. And this year, the car has not been as well-balanced. So to get a comparison and give an idea to the engineers and designers to sort of where to go with it. And I think we managed to do that. And then the next race, the target is to compare the new update package that is coming to the car. So I get it also back-to-back comparison, so hopefully I can give some feedback to the team, and it's critical for next year. They're designing a new car, so it's part of the philosophy, so hopefully we get a good answer.
You've got 109 Grand Prix, I think, under your belt. At your time at Caterham, you didn't really put a foot wrong, and you still don't have a seat there for this season. Are there any hard feelings? No
hard feelings, no. I mean, it just didn't work out at the end of last year. I think I made my stance quite clear where I'm standing, and it just didn't work out. It was a decision the team decided to take, and they almost had to take. But nevertheless, I've kept a good relationship and good contact with Tony Fernandez especially, and with Cyril also, and with everyone in the team. And you never know what happens in the future. And it's worked out now well to be back here, and don't worry about it too much. I think anything can happen in the future, so it's better to be here and make sure that you are ready if something comes up.
Well, Heikki and the cars have been out on track today, and let's see what happened with Ben Edwards.
Melbourne race winner Kimi Räikkönen set the pace in Friday practice. His fastest time on the medium tyre was just a few hundredths ahead of the two Red Bulls, with Webber faster than Vettel. But fourth fastest was Shanghai winner Fernando Alonso, and the Ferraris looked particularly impressive on their race simulations, as well as setting the pace in the morning session, although Felipe Massa did have the odd hair-raising moment. Rosberg was third for Mercedes in the morning, but generally he and Hamilton looked less comfortable here than in China, while the opposite was true at Force India, where both Sutil and Di Resta completed a very productive afternoon, the Scot setting the fifth fastest time overall. Incidents were rare, but Esteban Gutierrez did suffer a puncture when he clipped the front wing of Charles Pique's car and had to limp back to the pits, while Heikki Kovalainen made his return to Formula One in first practice with Caterham, as the team endeavours to make progress at the lower end of the grid. So Lotus, Red Bull and Ferrari have all shown well, and each one of those teams could produce our first repeat winner of the year this weekend.
Well, Heikki, how long did it take you, do you think, to get up to speed? Did you get up to speed with the Caterham today?
Well, I'm sure I fully I didn't, there was only a couple of laps, when the tyres were there, and then they were starting degrading, but nonetheless, everything felt pretty familiar, and all the procedures, and actually the feeling in the car was pretty good. I didn't have any issues, and I think it was a representative work that I could do for the team, and yeah, it was pretty much what I expected, to be honest.
What have you thought of the performances of the Caterham drivers this season?
Well, I think they've done okay. I think the fact is that the car is still pretty much last year's car, with some small updates so far, a bigger update coming in Barcelona, and other teams have got their new cars running, so it's inevitable that we've fallen a little bit behind. But I think it was a strategy for this year, to focus more already on next year's car, and the team is actually working already flat out for next year's car as well. So the package in Barcelona is part of that design philosophy, and we need to confirm that. But I think the driver's done pretty good, and the team has done okay, although it looks Marussia is ahead of us. I think even with the car that we have now, and when we put some updates, I think we can beat them. But for me, the main target and the real focus has to be already quite early next year.
Well, that's Heikki's thoughts, but let's hear some of the thoughts from the other drivers.
The tyres obviously seem to be the dominating factor. I think we could see for more or less everyone that in total after 10, 12, 14, 15 laps, tyres started to fall apart, and people were really struggling with the rears by the looks of it.
I don't think we're as far as it looks. I think other people are on perhaps different fuel loads to us, so I don't think we're as far as it seems, where it looks like we're 6/10 or something off the pace. I think maybe it's half of that, maybe less than half. But it's going to be a tough battle, that's for sure, this weekend.
The races are long these days, particularly with strategy playing such a huge role. So if you're in really, really good shape on Sunday, then you can do a lot of damage. If you haven't got the balance, then you're in trouble. So, well, let's have a look at who's doing what on the longish runs. Even then, it's still a little bit hard to say what people are doing with fewer loads.
A fifth is going to be very difficult, I think, this weekend. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but we're going to try and even achieve more than that. So we'll do all we can this weekend. But yeah, it's not going to be easy for us.
We've heard from plenty of the drivers tonight. Heikki, thanks very much for taking the time to join us. We'll see you again in Barcelona.
Thank you.
Well, off the track, there's always a lot of noise and concern about Formula One coming to Bahrain. And last year we saw heightened security. There were some issues, in fact. Force India refused to take part in free practice 2, saying that they needed to travel back into the hotel in daylight after some of their team personnel were involved in a roadside incident the previous night. And at the moment, well, there are ongoing protests. And here to tell us about the latest is BBC News sports correspondent Dan Roan. Dan, what do you know?
Well, you're right, the protests do continue, Lee. In fact, we hear tens of thousands of people on the streets tonight. They've gathered for a mass demonstration, a major rally on a motorway not too far from here in Sakir at the circuit. And it's really just more of the same, really, sadly, for Bahrain. We saw it over the last 3 years. We saw it, didn't we, 12 months ago when we stood here and there was trouble on the streets. And now we're seeing it again. And it's all because there is a Shiite majority on this island who want reforms from their Sunni rulers. And the Formula One race, of course, with all of the global exposure and media interest, gives those people an opportunity to enjoy the spotlight, and it gives them a chance to make their point effectively.
And the Crown Prince has been at the circuit today.
He has. There's lots riding on it for the Crown Prince, of course, because he's the man who brought Formula One to not just Bahrain, but to the Middle East region for the first time back in 2004. The Bahrainis pay handsomely, of course, for the privilege of doing so. They say it brings a lot to the economy, it helps the country move forward. But there's also pressure on them because of the safety concerns. I spent some time with the Crown Prince earlier on today as he greeted his subjects in the public area on the other side of the circuit. And I asked him whether or not this Grand Prix was safe for spectators and teams alike.
I'm sure that after the demonstration, which is legal and licensed and they've gone through all the proper procedures, there will be a very small minority of violent protesters who will try to cause some trouble with the police. But that's par for the course, unfortunately, and we've always called on the organisers of the marches to try and control the more rowdy elements.
So that's one side of the story, but Dan, who else has been saying what?
Well, here in Bahrain, opposition activists say that the ruling royal family are too heavy-handed, effectively, when it comes to suppressing dissidents, human rights abuses, imprisonment, a real crackdown on opposition. Not democratic enough, and as I say, they want reforms. Not just here, though. Back home in Britain, a group of MPs have said this race should not go ahead, and it gives the ruling royal family an opportunity to use it as a propaganda tool, effectively present an image to the outside world. Such is the pressure on F1 that today the sports authorities were forced to issue a statement saying it was safe. They said it was actually beneficial to Bahrain. It may actually bring reforms in. The fact they feel the need to do that, though, is interesting, and it will go ahead as planned. I asked Christian Horner, the team principal of the Red Bull team, of course, whether he backed the sports authorities. This is what he had to say.
Well, I think, you know, quite frankly, we enter a world championship that's organised by the FIA and FOM, and we trust their judgment. They're far closer to these political situations than we are. We're a sporting team that's taking part in a sporting event. I mean, certainly from our perspective, we haven't seen anything any different to any other year that we've been here, and we trust the judgment of the FIA and FOM.
Well, security's tight coming into the circuit. Dan, it seems more tight than last year. Is there more concern this year than there was last year?
Well, of course, 2 years ago, this race was cancelled. It's easy to forget that. And it came pretty close to being cancelled last year. You remember that Force India were affected, weren't they, directly? A crew were going home at night. A petrol bomb came close to hitting their car. 2 of their members didn't feel they were safe enough and they went home. A protester, sadly, was killed on the eve of the race. Now, that kind of thing hasn't happened yet. But as we've said, there are protests ongoing. And all it needs is for something like that to occur. And this tension, this controversy is ramped up to a new level. So I think F1 as a sport is nervous. There's anxiety here. They're trying to get on with what they do best, which is to drive, but there's no getting away from the fact that it is involved, sadly, with the political world as well. So lots at stake over the next 48 hours, I think.
Dan, thanks very much. So the politics continue, but so does the sport. And you can see highlights of qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix, 5:10 on BBC One and in HD, of course. And I'll be back tomorrow with Inside F1 at a new Saturday time of 7:45, still on the BBC News channel. And we will, of course, keep you up to date online, on TV and on radio on the BBC. But from here at the Sakhir circuit, good night.